I never knew silence could be so loud until I stood in a room full of people mourning a man I barely recognized anymore. My name is Elise Morgan.
I'm 39.
A nurse, a mother, and, until a week ago, a wife. Or, at least, that's what the obituary said. Beloved husband. Devoted father.
Chérie, de sang.
Funny how death polishes everything it touches. The church smelled like lilies and wood polish. My black dress didn't quite fit right, too loose in the shoulders, too tight in the chest. Grief does that to you, rearranges your body, without asking. My son, Jamie, sat beside me, his little suit wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. He kept fiddling with his sleeves like they were too long. They weren't. Across the aisle, Marjorie sat straight-backed, a navy blue hat perched like a crown. My mother-in-law. She hadn't spoken to me since the night Liam died. Not a word. Just a sharp nod at the hospital, like I was a necessary evil. I'd seen her look kinder at cashiers. Behind her, the pews were filled with people who knew parts of our story. Co-workers, neighbors, friends from Liam's old rugby team. They nodded when they caught my eye, soft pity smiles, the kind that make you want to shrink into your skin. None of them knew everything. Only a few even knew enough to suspect. But Marjorie knew too much. The service started slow. A hymn, a prayer, a eulogy from his cousin Max, who choked up halfway through a story about fishing trips and teenage pranks. I felt the tears start behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. I'd cried already. In the ER, in the bathroom with the faucet running, in Jamie's room when he fell asleep clutching his dad's hoodie. Today, I just needed to endure. Liam's photo was framed on the altar. That one from our 5th anniversary, when his beard was just coming in, and he smiled like he had a secret. I used to think that smile was for me. Now I wasn't so sure. Do we have to stay long? Jamie whispered, leaning into my arm. I smoothed his hair. Just a little longer, baby. He sighed and leaned his head against my shoulder. He was only 7, but he'd grown up faster in the past week than any child should. I kept telling him things were going to be okay. I just didn't say when. As the priest spoke about love and legacy, I let my gaze drift across the stained glass windows. I wasn't sure what I expected coming here.
Closure, maybe. Some kind of quiet.
A clean goodbye. But the minute I stepped into that church and saw how everyone looked at me, not cruel, just off, I realized this wasn't a farewell. It was a reckoning. You see, there's something no one tells you about being the widow of a man who wore 2 faces. One for the world, one for home. People grieve the version they knew. And sometimes, that version wasn't yours.
Idelu Liam.
I had. But love doesn't always survive impact. And ours had taken too many hits over the years, late nights, locked phones, whispered apologies that didn't quite land. We almost separated once. But then Jamie happened. And for a while we tried again. That's the part one kept telling myself, we tried. The priest's voice faded into the background as I noticed Marjorie glance over her shoulder. Her eyes landed on me like they always did, sharp, searching, tight with judgment. I wondered if she'd even mention me in her remarks. Maybe I'd be reduced to a line. He leaves behind a wife. No name, just the role. I reached into my purse and squeezed the tissues I'd folded in there this morning. Neat little squares, just in case. I didn't need them. Not yet. But I kept holding them. Like armor. Then the music swelled again. A hymn about mercy. Or maybe it was peace. I wasn't listening. I was watching Marjorie stand, one gloved hand on the pew.
Her turn to speak.
Jamie looked up at me. Is Grandma gonna talk now? I nodded. Yeah. What's she gonna say? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I had no idea. But something in my bones told me this funeral wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. Marjorie didn't walk to the podium. She glided. Slow, deliberate, like she wanted every step to be seen. The room adjusted around her the way it always did. Shoulders straightened, whispers died. Attention snapped into place. She had that effect on people. Command without warmth. She cleared her throat once, delicately, then smiled at the crowd. It wasn't a grieving smile. It was a performance smile. "Thank you all for coming to honor my son," she began, her voice steady, composed. Liam was a good man.
Loyal.
Hardworking. He gave everything to his family. I felt Jamie tense beside me. His fingers curled into the fabric of my dress. Marjorie continued, listing Liam's accomplishments like bullet points. His promotions. His volunteer work. His dedication. She spoke as if she were reading a resume, not eulogizing a life. And the room nodded along, soaking it in. Then her tone shifted. Just slightly. "As his mother," she said, pausing, "I feel it's important to speak honestly today." My stomach dropped. Liam believed in truth. In accountability. Even when it was uncomfortable. She clasped her gloved hands together. Especially then. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Marjorie turned, slowly, until she was facing me. "I know this is hard," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "But grief shouldn't erase reality." The church felt smaller. Hotter. "You see," she continued, "my son carried a burden many of you never knew about. A betrayal. One that weighed heavily on his heart." Jamie looked up at me, confused. "Mom," I swallowed.
Hard.
"Not long before he died," Marjorie said, voice still calm, "Liam discovered something that changed how he saw his marriage." A murmur rippled through the pews. My hands went numb. "He found out his wife," she said, enunciating each word, "had been keeping a secret from him for years." Every eye in the room turned toward me. I could feel it.
The shift.
The curiosity. The judgment blooming like mold in damp corners. Marjorie sighed, as if burdened by the weight of revelation. "I didn't want to bring this up today. But I won't let my son be remembered as a man who was blind." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood halfway without realizing it, then froze. My legs wouldn't cooperate. "She lied," Marjorie said simply. About who she was. About choices she made before Liam. Choices that came back to haunt him.
Whispers now.
Uncontained. I heard my name.
Elise.
Her. "Did you know?" Jamie's face crumpled. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I couldn't look at him. The secret wasn't scandalous.
Not really.
Not by the world's standards. But it was mine. And I had buried it because it had nearly destroyed me once already. Before Liam. Before marriage. Before stability. I had changed my name. I had left an abusive relationship in my 20s and disappeared. New city.
New job.
New start. Liam knew part of it. Not all. Marjorie knew because she had hired someone to dig.
She always did.
Marjorie's voice hardened. Liam deserved honesty. Instead, he lived with deception. That word hit harder than anything else.
Deception.
A woman near the front row shook her head. Someone else whispered, "I always wondered." Jamie started crying quietly. He pressed his face into my side, shoulders shaking. That's when I sat back down. Not because I agreed. Not because I was ashamed. But because I realized something terrible. This wasn't about Liam. This was about control. Marjorie wasn't grieving. She was reclaiming the narrative. And she was using my pain as her punctuation. She finished with a soft, practiced sigh. "I forgive you, Elise," she said, magnanimous. "For Liam's sake." The room stayed silent. Heavy. Awkward. The priest shifted near the altar, unsure whether to intervene. No one else moved. No one spoke. I stared straight ahead, my ears ringing, my chest hollow. This was it. This was the moment I'd feared walking into that church. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that someone else in that room had finally had enough. And they weren't going to stay silent. For a few seconds, no one said a word. The stillness was suffocating. Even the stained glass windows seemed to watch. Marjorie stepped down from the pulpit with practiced grace, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She didn't glance at me again. She didn't have to. I kept my eyes forward, blinking so hard it hurt. Jamie's fingers gripped mine like a lifeline. I could feel his confusion buzzing beneath his skin. I wanted to scream. Or run. Or vanish. Anything but sit there while my life was dismantled in front of mourners and flowers. But then, a chair scraped. Not loudly. Just enough to catch attention. Enough to shift the air. From the back row, someone stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, late 50s maybe. A dark gray suit, a faded scar along his jawline. I knew that face. Everyone in this room did. It was Pastor Green, Liam's high school football coach. The man who officiated our wedding. The man who'd known Liam since he was 17. He didn't ask permission. Didn't wait for a mic. He just walked to the front. And when he turned to face the crowd, his voice came out low, but unwavering. "I wasn't planning to speak," he said. "But I can't sit quietly after what I just heard." A hush fell. "I knew Liam," he said. "From his teen years, through his marriage. I knew his heart. And I also knew his flaws."
A beat.
People shifted. "He wasn't perfect," Pastor Green continued. "None of us are. He loved fiercely, but he struggled with trust. And if he carried pain toward the end, I don't believe it came from deception. I believe it came from the pressure of pretending everything was fine." Marjorie stiffened. "But what I won't stand for," he said, his voice rising slightly, "is using grief as a weapon. A funeral is not a courtroom, and a widow is not a target." He turned slowly, deliberately, toward me. "Elise," he said, eyes softening, "you've carried more than anyone should have to. I remember when Liam lost his job and you picked up double shifts to keep the lights on. I remember when Jamie was born and Liam panicked, and you were the one who held the family steady." I swallowed hard. My throat burned. This woman, he said, now addressing the entire church, wasn't Liam's shame. She was his anchor, even when the waves got ugly. He took a deep breath. And whatever secrets she held before this marriage, those were hers to carry. Hers to share, if she chose. It doesn't make her a liar. It makes her human. Someone whispered, "Amen." Another cleared their throat. But Green wasn't finished. "I have seen too many women buried beneath grief that wasn't theirs. Blamed for things they survived. Vilified for choices they made to survive." His eyes flashed toward Marjorie. "Not today." The room shifted. Something cracked in the atmosphere. A few heads nodded. A woman near the center pew dabbed her eyes. Jamie looked up at me. "Is he on our side?" I nodded, unable to speak. I squeezed his hand so tight, I probably left marks. Pastor Green stepped down and returned to his seat without fanfare.
No applause. No fanfare.
Just a silence that now buzzed with something new. Not shame. Not pity. But understanding. Even the priest, after a pause, adjusted the order of service and skipped the next reading. He simply nodded at me, as if to say, "You can breathe now." But breathing didn't come easily. Not yet. Because even though someone had finally stood up, even though truth had been named, I still had to face what came after. The looks. The questions. The raw, unstitched space grief leaves behind. But for the first time since Liam died, I didn't feel alone in it. After the service, people avoided me with the precision of guilt. Some glanced my way, then quickly found the floor tiles fascinating. Others offered awkward half-smiles or murmured things like, "Hang in there," as they passed. A few touched my arm with sympathy that came too late. No one dared say Marjorie's name. She, of course, was nowhere to be seen. Gone before the last hymn faded. Before the last condolence could be offered. She had come, delivered her final strike, and disappeared. The queen of grief, unchallenged in her own mind. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that church. I didn't shrink. I stood. Jamie clung to my side as we walked out into the crisp afternoon. The wind caught the hem of my dress, and for a second I felt exposed again. Then Jamie slipped his small hand into mine, and it grounded me. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. My heart cracked at the question. "No, baby," I said, crouching beside him. You were perfect. He nodded, but I saw it. The confusion still swimming behind his eyes. I knew I'd spend years undoing what today tried to teach him. That silence equals safety, that kindness must always be earned, that truth, even painful truth, should be hidden.
No.
Not my son. Not anymore. As we reached the parking lot, Pastor Green was waiting near his car. Elise, he said, tipping his head. You okay? I nodded. Getting there. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Something Liam left with me. Asked me to give it to you if this day came. I stared at the envelope. No name on the front. Just my husband's handwriting, looping and familiar. I didn't open it until we got home. Jamie was in his room, curled up with a blanket and his tablet, the funeral clothes finally peeled off and left in a soft heap on the floor. I sat at the kitchen table. The same one where we used to argue over bills, where Jamie learned to count Cheerios, where Liam once surprised me with takeout after a long shift. I ran my finger along the torn edge, then pulled the letter free. It was short. Not a confession. Not an apology. Just Liam. Elise. I know I didn't always get it right. I know I held back when you needed more. But if I leave this world before making it clear, you were never the lie. You were the reason I kept trying to tell the truth. I'm sorry for the days I didn't protect you. I hope someday someone will.
Love.
I sat still for a long time after that.
No tears.
Just breath. Long, even unfamiliar breath. The next morning, I put the letter in Jamie's keepsake box. The one with his hospital bracelet and his first tooth. One day, when he's older, I'll tell him everything. Not just the pain, but the truth. The survival. The strength it took to stay. A week later, a small package arrived. No return address. Inside, a single bracelet. Woven leather with a silver clasp. I'd made it years ago during a crafts fair we took Jamie to. Liam wore it for a while, then lost it. Or so I thought. Tucked beneath it was a note. You stood taller than any man in that room. I saw it. And so did Jamie.
Gee.
I didn't need to guess. Green had seen me. Not the widow.
Not the past. Me.
Life didn't become a fairy tale after that. There were still bills. Still long shifts. Still nights when the bed felt too big and the silence too loud. But something had changed. I stopped walking with my head down at school pickups. I stopped pretending I was fine when I wasn't. I stopped letting other people narrate my story. Jamie noticed. He started asking questions. Real ones. Brave ones. About courage and kindness. About truth and shame. About what it means to forgive without forgetting. One night, brushing his teeth beside me, he looked up through the mirror and asked, Mom, do you think Dad knew you were strong? I smiled at him. Not the broken smile, not the polite one. The real one. I think he knew, I said softly. But I don't think he ever saw it. Not like you do. Jamie nodded. Then, after a pause, he said, Well, I see it every day. And just like that, I knew. Grief didn't make me less. It carved out space for me to become more.